The Foreclosed House Trap by Marcus Johnson. I started working at a pizza place when I was 16 in the suburbs of a big city. At first, they had me helping the chef in the kitchen and cleaning up. After a couple months, my boss said I'd cover for the main delivery guy on his days off. I was pumped for the chance. Then, out of nowhere, the delivery guy quit. He came back from a delivery looking totally freaked out, his face all pale and his eyes wide. He went into the boss's office and I heard them arguing for like 15 minutes. When he came out, he just said, "Good luck, kid," and told me he quit. I asked why, and he just said, "It's a shitty job, that's all." He patted me on the back and left. That was the last time I ever saw him. I knew there had to be more to the story, but I didn't think much of it at the time. So for the next couple weeks, I became the new delivery guy until they could find a replacement. About 2 weeks in, my boss gave me an address for a delivery. I punched it into the GPS like usual and headed out. The sun was setting as I drove, and I was hoping for a quick 2-minute drop-off so I could get home. No such luck. It was way out in the rural part of town where the houses are like a quarter-mile apart. I pulled up in front of this 2-story house and just stared at it. The creepiest feeling washed over me. The lawn was overgrown with weeds, dead trees in the yard, old porch with no furniture, just bare wood. It looked abandoned. But I got out anyway and knocked. I was praying my boss had given me the wrong address so I could get the hell out of there. Then I heard the door lock rattling. It creaked open, and there stood this ancient lady. She had to be at least 70 with wispy white hair and missing teeth. She was so short and skinny. But her eyes, man, her eyes were just glaring at me. It really freaked me out. I figured if I was nice, maybe things would be okay. "1 pepperoni pizza, ma'am," I said, trying to sound friendly. "Yes," she croaked out like she had a sore throat. "All righty, here you go," I said, holding out the pizza, but she just stared at it with this blank expression. She didn't take it, just reached for her purse. "Did you come with someone else?" she asked suddenly. I froze, then looked up at her, still glaring at me. That question really scared me. No," I stammered. "Where's the other one? He ran off on me last time, ran off." It made no sense. "He quit a few weeks ago," I told her. She dug around in her purse for what felt like forever, the longest minute of my life. Then she stopped and just stared at me. Not surprised or confused, just this intense look like she was thinking hard about something. I could tell she was gripping something in her right hand inside the purse. My heart started racing. What if it was pepper spray, or a knife, or even a gun? Why was it taking so long just to get out $10? Then I saw movement behind her, a man's silhouette coming towards the door. At the same moment I heard leaves crunching to my left. A deep voice said, "Hey." I looked over and saw a middle-aged guy's head peeking over the porch railing. He looked pissed. He started climbing up onto the porch, and that's when I knew I had to get out of there. I sprinted to my car, chucked the pizza inside, cranked the engine, and peeled out of there. I didn't look back as I sped off into the darkness. I had to lie to my boss and pay for the pizza myself, but it was so worth it. The day I quit, I finally told my boss what happened that night. He freaked out and asked why I hadn't said anything sooner. Apparently, the other delivery guy, James, had just said he walked out without paying attention. My boss called the cops to check it out. He called me back a couple days later. The house was registered as foreclosed for over a year. When the cops broke in, they found 3 people living there, 2 men and the old lady. They all got arrested. My boss didn't give me any other details. I'm still traumatized, wondering what would have happened if I'd stayed. They could have easily jumped me. Thank God I quit, and I'm still alive. As I reflect on that terrifying night, I'm reminded of the Quranic verse, "And whoever puts their trust in Allah, He will suffice him." It gives me comfort knowing Allah was watching over me, even in that moment of danger. The Basement Money by Tyler Williams. I'll never forget the night I covered my friend's shift at the pizza place we worked at. He was usually the delivery guy while I manned the register. I'd made 2 normal deliveries when my manager gave me one last order for the night. It was 5 miles away, way farther than I was used to. The GPS had me turn off the highway into this tiny town I'd never even heard of. It took me down all these side streets that were even quieter than the main road. Half the streetlights weren't even working. I had a bad feeling about the whole place. I just wanted to drop off the pizza and get out of there fast. I pulled up to this little single-story house and rang the bell. The door swung open almost immediately. This older guy, maybe late 50s, answered. He had just a few wisps of grey hair left and a pale face with a grey mustache. He smiled and said he'd be right back. He disappeared into the house, and I stood there in the cold, waiting. I was already uncomfortable with the sketchy neighborhood, and this guy wasn't helping. I heard his footsteps creaking on the floor inside as he came back to the door, still smiling. He told me to come in where it was warm while I waited. I said it was fine, but he kept insisting. I know it was dumb, but it was freezing outside like 5 degrees. For some reason I stepped into this stranger's house. He shut the door behind me and hurried off to another room. It wasn't even much warmer inside. The guy clearly didn't have heat. I found myself inching closer to the door as I got more and more creeped out. The man came back out of a room and gave me another smile. He opened a door that led down to the basement. He looked down and said he normally keeps his money down there. He asked me to come down with him, but I refused. Even from where I was standing, I could see it was pitch black down there. And then it all went to hell. I heard a step creaking from the basement. Someone else was down there. I knew I had to get out fast. I turned to open the door, but the old guy was right on top of me. I punched him in the face and managed to get him in a hold, but I heard heavy footsteps coming up the basement stairs. I had to move. I shoved the old man to the floor, ran outside, jumped in my car and sped off without looking back. I told my manager everything, and he called the cops. I don't know what ever came of it. My manager gave me a few days off after that. Since then, I'm a lot smarter about never going into a stranger's house no matter what. That night still haunts me. In moments of fear, I often recall the hadith, "None of you should point a weapon at his Muslim brother, for he does not know that perhaps Satan may tempt him to kill his brother, and thus he would fall into a pit of fire." It reminds me to be cautious, but also not to let fear turn me against others. But I still wonder, who was in that basement? And what would have happened if I'd gone down there? The Woman Behind the Glass by Ethan Rodriguez. I was out doing a delivery one late night. It was probably the longest drive I have ever taken for a pizza delivery from the pizza place I worked at. It was a 20-minute drive, which isn't too crazy out where I live. Plus, they ordered 4 large pies, so I figured it was a party, and I would get a much bigger tip. Navigating the dirt roads at night was always annoying, though. I pulled up to the given address. It was some old sketchy-looking building, literally in the middle of a forest clearing. There were no cars parked anywhere or any lights on. I put my car in park and called my boss. I asked him to reread the address at least 3 times to make sure I typed it in right. But that checked out. I could tell he was in a really mood, and he told me to at least knock on the door and check it out. He would normally get mad if we took back 1 pie, but I was afraid of what he would do if I brought back 4. I was insanely unnerved, but got out anyway, and forced myself to the front door of the building. There was no doorbell, so I just knocked really hard. I heard nothing and didn't really expect to hear anything. I was extremely disappointed. Not because nobody answered the door, but because I was realizing that it was all waste of time and gas. I knocked 1 more time out of desperation and then began to hear some kind of rustling noises from inside of the building. I knocked again and yelled that I was the pizza guy. There was silence now. I felt a bit more uncomfortable now than before, but before I could turn around, I noticed something at the window. There was someone looking through the window. I couldn't tell if it was a man or a woman. All I noticed were their eyes. Their eyes were open wider than I knew possible, staring intently at me. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up as I locked eyes with this person. My heart started racing, and I could hear my own rapid breathing in the eerie silence. A chill ran down my spine as I realized how utterly alone I was out here in the middle of nowhere. For a split second, I thought about the Quranic verse my grandmother always recited when I was scared as a kid, and whoever puts their trust in Allah, then He will suffice him. But in that moment, all I could think was getting the hell out of there. I was disturbed enough by this and dropped the pizzas and ran back to my car. The shitty thing wouldn't start until turning the key for the third time. I drove off the grass and back onto the dirt road, but I felt the car rocking about, shaking and bumping. Something wasn't right. I didn't make it far from the building before I started hearing a sharp scraping sound coming from outside. There was so much resistance that I couldn't even drive. The car came to a stop. I got out of the car to check what the hell was wrong. A chill ran up my spine as I began to feel like my heart was constantly skipping beats. My tires had been slashed and had completely fallen off the rim. Not just the front, though all 4 tires were slashed. I realized somebody did this when I was knocking on the door to that building. Instead of running, I got back in the car and locked the doors. I was so close to that building I could practically see it from where I was. If it weren't for the trees blocking the view, I dialed 911 and explained everything to the operator. She told me the cops would be over as soon as possible and that I need to stay hidden. I asked her if it was advisable to stay in the car or run, and she told me it would be best to stay in the car with the door locked. She asked me to stay in the line with her until the cops arrived. My whole body was shaking in all directions. There was nothing but dark, seemingly endless forest. I knew it would take forever for the cops to get there. I was not comfortable with sitting in that car so close to whoever did this. The next part, though, is what utterly destroyed me. It still shakes me to this day, and I hope nobody ever has to experience this kind of fear. As I was scanning all the windows, making sure nobody was outside, I looked in the rearview mirror, and there was the same person I saw at that window. Eyes open wider than ever I could see. Now that there was a woman, and I could ever so slightly see a smile begin to spread across her face. My blood ran cold, and I felt like I couldn't breathe. The woman's face was pale, almost glowing in the darkness, and her smile seemed to stretch unnaturally wide, revealing rows of sharp, yellowed teeth. I blinked hard, hoping it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. But when I opened my eyes, she was still there, her gaze boring into me. I opened my door and full-on sprinted into the woods, not caring how much noise I made. I ran until I was out of breath, which didn't take long, and I hid behind a giant log on the ground. I tried to cover my loud breathing with my hand as I waited and waited for what felt like hours, until I finally heard sirens in the distance. The sound of twigs snapping nearby made my heart leap into my throat. I held my breath, praying that whatever was out there wouldn't find me. As I crouched there trembling, I could swear I heard faint whispers carried on the wind, speaking words I couldn't quite make out. I gathered up all the stamina I had left to run all the way back in the direction of the dirt road. Eventually, the glowing red and blue lights came into view, and I had never felt better in my life. They were parked in front of my car, investigating with flashlights. I came out yelling at them like a lunatic to help me. I fell to the floor and started to gag, almost throwing up from running so much. They picked me up and began to question me, to which I explained everything to the best of my ability. One of the 2 cars drove over to the building, and the 2 officers began to search the building. They came back with nothing except for a couple of spiky objects. These objects were exactly the same as the ones used to slash my tires. The cops guessed that it was some kind of sick, demented couple, being that I saw the woman, but unfortunately they were never found, and that still kills me to this day. I obviously quit my job right after that and started working at a local grocery store. I know that I'll never forget seeing that woman at the back of my car. The image of her face is seared into my memory. And sometimes I still wake up in a cold sweat thinking I see those wide, unblinking eyes staring at me. From the darkness, I've tried to rationalize it, tell myself it was just some crazy person playing a sick joke. But deep down, I know there was something truly evil out there that night, something that defied explanation. I still can't drive down lonely roads at night without constantly checking my rearview mirror. And every time I see a woman with long dark hair, my heart skips a beat wondering if it's her. I don't know if I'll ever feel truly safe again, knowing that she's still out there somewhere, maybe waiting for her next victim.